Okay, so Sarah has gone very in depth with the data there, and I'm going to go very simple and back to the patient. So for me, I am COVID Services Manager for Dorset Healthcare. That's my day-to-day job. And when we were asked to rapidly step up a vaccination centre as part of the COVID-19 pandemic response, with my yoke as a nurse on the Consultant Practitioner Programme, it was really essential to me that from that inception point, we provided a safe and effective, but also really positive experience for our patients that were coming through the doors, lots of whom hadn't been out for a year, into a very clinical environment. Well, for a very clinical task, but not in a clinical environment. Most of the people that came to our vaccination centre in the BIC in Bournemouth knew it as either an ice skating rink or the place they'd been for a beer festival, depending on when they'd last been. So that was most paramount in my priorities when setting up my team and my service. So on January the 18th, we opened to the public. And this is Valentina. So Valentina was our first patient through the doors. She was very typical of the patients that we were getting through at that point. As I said, she hadn't been out of the home or out of her home for at least a year. In fact, Valentina didn't speak any English, and she was also in a wheelchair. So she was the perfect test patient for us to come through first, because she gave us some really amazing feedback and some quick fixes that we knew we had to make. So we used the input of the Dorset Healthcare QI and patient experience team to create a learning environment at the BIC Vaccination Centre. It was essential to me that they were part of the team from the beginning. We needed to create a learning culture. We used the basis of fix, improve and change as a really simple format for the staff that were working there and the volunteers and the security staff. Because they were all essential members of that feedback loop and that ability to fix things. We created formal and informal feedback routes from all of the staff, all of the volunteers and the public that were attending the centre. And one of the most successful elements that we implemented were whiteboards with keep, chuck, change and add on, which were in the staff areas and the volunteer areas, and anybody could write on them. So they were anonymous. As people walked past, if there was something they particularly liked or particularly disliked, they shoved it on the board. Didn't matter whether they were a volunteer coming for their first visit or the medical director coming to check we were doing things properly. Anybody was welcomed and encouraged to write on the boards. And we collected all of the notes off the board every day and discussed them as a team and talked about exactly what was within our power to change, what was necessary to change, and what wasn't necessary to change, but we should give some feedback to the staff about why that was. As a result of some of this anecdotal feedback that the volunteers were collecting from the patients as they were attending and they were chatting to them and sort of creating that slightly more comfortable environment, that more human environment for them, lots of people were suggesting that they were having difficulty getting from the car park up the hill to the entrance of the BIC. Originally, when it was set up, or when the mass vaccination centres were set up, they were not designed. NHS England hadn't imagined the older population coming to them. They thought they would all go to their GP surgeries. Actually, the older population just wanted to get vaccinated and they were happy to go wherever. So we needed to quickly put in a fix to help them get up the hill more easily. So we started looking for solutions as a team. So we discussed across our system with the CCG, we discussed with our volunteer organisations, local authorities, and it led to us being loaned 2 golf buggies, as you can see there, from the local golf course that was closed at the time because of the COVID restrictions that were in place. And the Vax Express was born. So evaluation, this is a short video which hopefully will work in a minute. It's very light-hearted and just shows the Vax Express in use. But we continuously evaluated, so every day we evaluated how well received the buggies were, how well they were being used, whether they were meeting the need of our population, whether they were still essential as our population changed as we went through the cohorts requiring vaccination. And this was done across teams, within teams, across systems, within systems. And virtual working was a massive barrier unblocker for us to allow us to have those conversations, but also for us to use a really simple but effective innovation to introduce people to QI, and that actually it's not a big scary thing. So we didn't use any, apart from the keep, change, chuck and add board, we didn't use any of the sort of traditional tools as far as they were concerned. In the background, obviously we were collating it all through the sort of data and bits and pieces, PDSAs that we would normally do. But for those that we were working with, it was just a way of structuring and framing those ideas. When the golf course reopened, they sadly wanted their buggies back. But one of the volunteers was so overwhelmed with what a difference they had made to the public coming through and how much joy they brought to people, that they actually donated £1,000 to the Vaccination Centre so that we could hire some and retain their availability. And we kept them up until July, when we had to close for the cheerleaders. So hopefully this is going to work.
Click on the arrow on your screen, on the arrow on the slide. There we are. It will come.
Bless them. They're very well liked. People still ask, people ask if we can have them back now. We really don't need them now. So this is my team, or a small part of my team. The vaccination team are a diverse group of individuals. We're from all professions, all walks of life, lots of retirees that have returned and we're now convincing to come back onto the register. And most of them had never heard or used QI before working with us. However, as I said, through the real life application and keeping it simple, we've been able to embed a culture of change and of learning within our whole team. And we hope that they'll continue to use the principles wherever else that they may go on to work.